Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I have to say, visually, this rug up here is beautiful. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be at Google, and I'm going to try to condense my 3-hour training session into about 45 minutes because I'd like to leave time for Q&A, but I'd like to review some rules that I have for every session where I present. The first rule is that you need to interrupt me with any questions, comments, or feedback you have at the time. I have no train of thought. I will go right back to where I was. Don't worry about interrupting me. The second rule is you don't need to write anything down. I prefer that you engage in the conversation and looking at the works of art. And the last rule is the hardest to follow, that I ask you that for the next 45 minutes to an hour that we're together to refrain from using 2 words, obviously and clearly. Try to do that for the rest of the day and even for the rest of the week and when you go back to your work, for the very simple reason that we live and work in a very complex world. Very little is obvious and even less is clear. So rather than saying, obviously it's a case of X, I would prefer that you say it appears to me to be a case of X because of Y and Z. Okay? Those are my only rules. So if you look at the first slide that I've put up on the screen, I try to put thought into my opening slide. How am I going to ease people into thinking differently about works of art that we see and how we communicate about those works? And I'm showing you the largest equestrian sculpture in the country. You don't have to worry about that. It's in Irving, Texas. But what I love about this sculpture, it's counterintuitive. The horses are completely stationary and the water is moving. The water moves 24/7 and the horses don't. And so I want to orient your brain to thinking differently about works of art and communicating what we see. So I'm going to put you to work now. It's the post-lunch coma. Can you please put your right hand up in the air? Right hand up in the air. And you can only put your hand down when you see something definitive and unequivocal in the slide that I've put up that you could describe to somebody who was not looking at the slide. If you see something definitive and unequivocal, you can put your hand down. Now, the majority of you still have your hands up. So I'm going to tell you that what you're looking at is a mammal. If you see a mammal definitive, now it's funny, some hands are going up, they're coming down, they're going up, they're coming down. Now, if you see this mammal, you can put your hand down. Now, for those of you that still have your hands up, the mammal has 4 legs. I'm going to tell you that the mammal that you're looking at has 4 legs. If you see a 4-legged mammal, you can put your hand down. You can all put your hands down now. I'm going to show you an overexposed version of this photograph and show you what you were looking at. You were looking at a cow. Now go back to this slide. Do you see it now? Sure you do. It's very hard to unsee what I've just shown you. Now, this is not a trick photograph in any way. It was designed by a man named Dr. Samuel Renshaw. It's familiarly known as the Renshaw cow. And he trained Navy pilots in World War II to discern enemy warfare. And he designed a series of visual exercises. And I begin with this exercise not to disarm you in any way, but to share an experience that I had about 2 years ago when I went to hear a man named Apollo Robbins speak. Now, for those of you who don't know who Apollo Robbins is, he's a professional con man, for lack of a better term, who now works on the right side of the law. I had heard about him. I wanted to hear what he had to say. He was standing at the door of the auditorium where I went to hear him speak, and he shook everyone's hand who came in the door. And I got to the door, and my bracelets were gone. And he took people's watches, and he took the glasses off their head, and no one had any idea that their stuff was gone. So after he returned our things, he started with this exercise. I attended the evening with a colleague of mine, and when he put the slide up and asked us to do what I asked you to do, to put our right hand up in the air and put it down when we see something definitive and unequivocal, my colleague put her hand down right away. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, is that a flying platypus? And I'm thinking, is that a kitten? Is that an owl? I didn't know what I was looking at, and I kept my hand raised in the air the entire time. Robin leans over and whispers in my ear, "I can't believe you don't see this," she says. And it makes me nervous, and then I start to sweat profusely because this is what I do for a living. I help people enhance their observation skills, and I could have looked at this slide the rest of the day and never seen a cow. So I begin with the premise that no 2 people see anything the same way. Did anyone in the room see the cow initially? 1, 2. You still don't see the cow. Okay, that's okay. It's there. So there were 2 of you in the room that saw the cow initially.
Oh, okay, now I see.
Now you get it. Okay, good, because the outline's there. Yeah, there you go. So no 2 people see anything the same way. So I show you a painting now, a 16th century painting by Giuseppe Arcimboldo. And the painting on the left is called The Vegetable Gardener. And if you look at it, it's a black bowl with chestnuts and onions and leeks and turnips. And when you turn it upside down, it's a head. And it reminded me of the line Dr. Wayne Dyer said that the reason for his success was that he teaches people, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I say that twice. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I see my role in teaching the art of perception as helping people to change the way they look at things by using art as the data to do that. My course is called The Art of Perception, Rethinking How We See. I started it in 2000. I am a recovering attorney and an art historian, and I like to think that I've taken the practical aspects of each of those disciplines and melded them together into this program that I started when I was the head of education at the Frick Collection in New York City. It started as a program for medical students only. The idea was, let's take medical students out of the clinical setting, out of the hospital, bring them to an art museum, teach them how to look at works of art, so when they go back into the hospital and back into the clinical setting, they'll be better observers of their patients. It wasn't rocket science, and it wasn't my idea. It came from the Yale Center for British Art, and with their gracious permission, I started a version of it at the Frick. Everything was wonderful. I was working with 7 different medical schools at the Frick, and then one evening in 2004, I went out to dinner with friends, and I was telling them that my medical students had unbelievable myopia. It was diagnosis and physiology and anatomy and pathology all the time, and they knew nothing about art, which is fine, but they didn't know anything except medicine. A friend of mine said, why are you just doing this for medical students? Why aren't you doing this for people who really need good observation skills? I said, like whom? He said, like cops. Why aren't you doing this for homicide detectives? And I thought, that's a really good idea. So Monday morning, I picked up the phone and I called the NYPD. I start very big. Picked up the phone, and I want you to picture the guy at the switchboard at the NYPD. And I said, hello, my name is Amy Herman. I'm the head of education at the Frick Collection. I have a great idea. I said, I train medical students to enhance their observation skills, and I think you should send homicide detectives. Dead silence on the other end of the phone. I was transferred 7 times until I got to a deputy commissioner who knew that I heard what I was saying. He heard what I was saying because he said, Ms. Herman, if this is such a visual thing, why are we on the phone? 6 months later, every newly promoted captain in the NYPD had to come to the Frick Collection, learn to look at objects with me, and it was a wonderful program. Eventually, just to fast forward to explain how I got here, the Wall Street Journal called. They wanted to know what I was doing with cops at the Frick Collection, like something illicit was going on, and I invited the Wall Street Journal to come see the classes. 9 months later, an article came out on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and it said, to master the art of solving crime, cops study Vermeer at the Frick. And what I didn't know was that the reporter not only came to my classes, but she went out onto the streets and the precincts of New York City asking these cops, how are you doing your jobs differently after learning to look at works of art? So after the Wall Street Journal article, every inbox in my life exploded. And I got calls from all over the world, from the FBI and the CIA and the military and first responders and lawyers and doctors and social workers. And they all said the same thing, come teach us how to see like you did those cops in New York. I can't teach anyone how to see. You either know how to see, as Leonardo da Vinci calls it, sapere vedere, to know how to see. Can't teach it. But what I can do and what I'm going to do today is give you an overview of the program that I run for all surveillance agents of the FBI, all new analysts at the CIA. I train the Navy SEALs. I work with first responders, military. I do all of that, and I don't tell you about all the places where I teach to tell you how busy I am, but rather it's to tell you what I've noticed is that everyone in my sessions already has good observation and perception skills. That's not the problem. The problem I've seen is in the consistent breakdown of effective communication between what we see and what we say. Something gets lost from here to here to here and to here. Something gets lost. So I try to remedy that. That's my goal in the art of perception, using art as the data. And I tell my participants they have to do 4 things. Every new situation, every new problem, every new witness, every new patient, you do 4 things. You assess your situation, you analyze it, you decide what's important, what do I need, what don't I need, you articulate it. You write a report, you tell someone, you send an email, you write a text, and then you act. Then you make a decision, you adapt your behavior based on the other 3 things that you do. So now I travel the world, I quit my full-time job, and I now teach the art of perception, my 3-hour course for CEOs, philanthropy, education, and I still work very much in the intelligence community and law enforcement. Why art? Well, first of all, I love it. That's what I'm trained in. But art gives us, as Jonathan and I were just speaking about this, art gives us a tremendous opportunity to look at the innovative, the creative, the new, the exigent, the chaotic, like the painting on the left. You have men and women and children and dogs and birds and sunlight and alcohol and babies. You have all kinds of things going on. You could talk about that painting forever. But the painting on the right is much simpler. Much simpler. It's a black bowl with a red base, and it has 5 quinces in it. No, they're not pears, they're not apples, who cares what they are, but they're quinces. Art gives us the opportunity to talk about very complicated situations, very simple situations, and everything in between. So that's why I use art. This is not about Picasso versus Pollock, okay? If you know anything about art, that's wonderful, but you need to leave it at the door for today, except you. You don't have to leave your knowledge at the door. I ask that you leave your substantive knowledge at the door because we're using art as data, as a fresh set of data to rethink skills that we use every day in our professional context. Now, you can groan if you want when you see this, but I can sum up my entire course in these 2 non-artistic images. For those of you who don't know what the slide on the right is, about a year and a half ago, Thank you, I'm in total agreement. A year and a half ago, this woman in the UK purchased this dress to wear in a wedding, and for reasons still unbeknownst to me, she posted on Facebook and said, "What color is my dress?" And my initial response was, "Who cares what color your dress is?" But the question and the responses went viral to the tone of hundreds of millions of people chimed in. Raise your hand if you see this photograph as white and gold. Look at that. Now put your hands down. If you're sane like I am and you see it as blue and black, put your hand up. So in this room, we're about 50-50. In my classes, it's usually 60-40. 60% see it as white and gold, 39 blue and black, and 1% sees it purple, gray, green, and brown, and I don't want to know about that. That just complicates everything. So half of my class addresses the issue that no 2 people see anything the same way. That's half the class. The other half of the class is addressed by the Domino's pizza box. In May of 2015, there was a particularly heinous crime committed in Washington, D.C. CEO, his wife, their 10-year-old boy, and their housekeeper were held hostage in their home. They were killed, and then the house was set on fire. You may remember hearing about this. And the morning after the fire, the crime scene investigation team came from the Washington Metropolitan Police Department. And one of those investigators had the wherewithal not only to see the Domino's pizza box on the floor in the kitchen, but to say out loud to his colleagues, "Do you think this is the kind of family that would order a Domino's pizza? This family in this house here, in this neighborhood, do you think they'd order a Domino's pizza?" And with a gloved hand, he lifted the box, and there were 2 discarded crusts in the box. He took one of them, he sent it for DNA analysis. They had a suspect within 48 hours based on the DNA and the saliva on the pizza crust. Now, in my world, we say that's excellent police work. But it's something more than that, and you have to forgive me for the terrible pun. It's thinking outside the box. I'm sorry. And I even hate that phrase, but it's so appropriate here. So my class is about the idea that no 2 people see anything the same way, and you know what? Who cares about a dumb dress? I don't. I don't care who sees it as white and gold and who sees it as blue and black, but what happens in the real world when 2 of you are at the same meeting, or 2 of you are in the operating room, or 2 of you are interviewing the same witness, and you walk away with fundamentally different perceptions of what you just saw? What do you do then? That's what I'm trying to address. And the other half of the class having to do with the Domino's pizza box is we need to solve problems creatively. We can't just do the same thing all the time. It worked last time, let's do it this time. It doesn't work that way. So I ask you to shift your perspective with me this afternoon, to think differently about what we're looking at. Because my goal is, as much fun as I want this to be, when you walk out the door, I want you thinking differently about your work. So I'm going to ask you to shift your perspective like JR did. For those of you who don't know JR, he's a photographer. He takes pictures of people, mostly women, blows them up to billboard size and puts them all over the world. Runways, buildings, public places. And there were some countries that hated his work so much that they thought he was defacing public property, so they issued warrants for his arrest. And while these warrants were pending, he's very famous now, there are no warrants pending anymore, but when they were, he was commissioned to do this self-portrait. And I think it's brilliant. It's called Self-Portrait in a Woman's Eye, Kenya, 2009. What did he do? He shifted his perspective on what a self-portrait is, and he took a picture of himself in a woman's eye without revealing his facial identity. Why? Because it would facilitate his arrest. Who wants to get arrested? So he created this by shifting his perspective. Why do you need to shift your perspective? Because this is the complicated world we live in now. I work with people that are dealing with mass shootings, civil rights issues, terrorist bombings, and the ongoing problem of ISIS. But before we can wrap our heads around all the complex problems we're facing in our world today, we have to realize that they're matters of perception. And how we communicate what we perceive those issues to be is of critical importance. So we need to shift our perspective to think about the world we live in. Now, I'm showing you an icon in art history. Again, shifting your perspective. It's called Luncheon on the Grass by Manet, 1863. What do you have here? It's very modern. Two fully clothed men, a completely naked woman. Her clothes, her food are over here. There's a woman back here playing in the water, oblivious to everything. It's just one of those paintings everyone who studies art history knows. 100 years later, look what Picasso did with it. He turned it on its head. You still sort of have the two fully clothed men. You definitely have the naked woman. Her food is over here. There's another naked woman in the back. And he just turned the entire icon of art history. He turned it upside down because the premise is that no two people see anything the same way. Now, when we talk about problem solving, the same artist Manet entered into a contractual relationship in 1880 with a collector, Charles Ephrussi. Manet was going to paint this little painting of asparagus, it's about this big, for the sum of 800 francs. When Ephrussi sent him the check was for 1,000 francs instead of 800. And Manet was perplexed. He didn't know what to do. You don't issue refunds in the 19th century. What do you do with the extra 200 francs? So this is what Manet did. He painted a single asparagus and sent it to the collector with a note that said, "One fell out of your bunch." This is about solving problems creatively. Don't just fall into a pattern of doing the same thing all the time. So how do I do this? How do I take works of art, and when I have audiences, 99.9% of whom have not studied art in any way, they don't have a trained eye in art history, and a very high percentage of them have never been to an art museum, how do I make art relevant for them and help them change the way they do their work? The book Visual Intelligence that you have is a natural outgrowth of this course. But what I've tried to do is take works of art, like you see on the screen, ask my participants to step in really closely to these works of art and ask questions. Ask such precise questions that they will ascertain that this work of art is a wooden board with 10,000 galvanized nails and one unbroken piece of thread. The whole thing is made from one unbroken piece of thread. And I know what you're probably thinking. So what? Yeah, that's really cool. That's visually compelling, but so what? What does it have to do with my work? It has everything to do with your work, and those are my participants, because I know they're not looking at works of art for a living, but you are asking questions. Everyone I work with has to ask questions, and I want to make sure that my program can help them frame the questions to elicit the information they need to do their jobs more effectively. So is it relevant? 10,000 nails, one unbroken piece of thread? Yes, it is, because how'd you get there? So I show you now two portraits of the lovely Mrs. Maud Dale. Her husband Chester was a philanthropist. He gave his money and he gave his his art collections to museums around the country, and he commissioned Léger on the left and George Bellows on the right to paint his wife. If I didn't tell you that these were the same person, would you necessarily know it? Probably not. No two people see anyone the same way. This goes for situations as well. Two paintings by Matisse, The Open Window at Coulior. The one on the left is from 1905 and the one on the right is from 1914. Matisse changed his mind about how he saw the scene out the window. By 1914, the world was a bleaker place. It was on the eve of World War I. His town in France had been taken over by the Germans. His brother was a prisoner. Things were darker. No more pretty boats, blues, greens, and pinks out the window, so Matisse changed his mind. Now, the fact that you're sitting in the room with me today tells me that you don't paint for a living. I don't think any of you paint for a living. You don't have this option. You can't get away with this. If somebody asks, why did you make a certain decision, you can't say, because I felt like it. We're accountable for our decisions. I saw this, I noticed this, I perceived this to be the situation, therefore I acted accordingly. It would be nice if we could all be Matisse, but we can't. Now, I show you this sculpture by Anish Kapoor. It's many, many, many pieces of stainless steel assembled in such a way that when you stand in front of it, you see 5,000 versions of yourself. It's a reminder to us that self-perception is critical. It's critical to professional and personal growth. You need to know what you look like. I have short hair. I have very short hair. I didn't always have short hair, but I had to start a chemotherapy regimen a year and a half ago. I was bald as an eagle. I shaved my head so I wouldn't lose my hair to chemotherapy. And after I shaved my head, my best friends took me to this sculpture and made me see 5,000 versions of my bald self so I would know what I would look like for the next year. Wasn't pretty, but I needed to know what I look like. And knowing what we look like literally and figuratively is critical. You need to know if your colleagues can't talk to you before your third cup of coffee. You need to know if you don't like to talk on the phone. I tell people that I had a new boss at the Frick Collection who sent me an email on his first day in all capital letters. Did you ever get an email from someone in all capital letters? And I thought, it's his first day. Is he already mad at me? Is he being emphatic? Did the caps lock button get stuck? What's the problem here? And I did what he asked me to do, but you know, for the next 8 years, every email from that man came in all capital letters. And I really wish I'd had the wherewithal by the end of my tenure at the Frick Collection to say to him, enough with the all caps. Your work isn't getting done any faster because you send people emails in all capital letters. You need to know how you come across. People always want to show you how smart they are. I'm sure here at Google that never happens, but people often want to show you how smart they are. And when I put these two works of art up and I say, okay, who's going to tell me the similarities and differences between these two works of art? Oh, the hands go up. That's easy, they say. You have two people on the left, a man and a woman. You have two people on the right. It's two men. They have hair on the left. They're bald on the right. They're white on the left. One's white. One's black on the right. I've had people even say, oh, they're straight on the left and gay on the right. How would you know that? By looking at a work of art. What I really want the astute observer to say, though, lay the foundation. Lay the groundwork. Tell me that you're looking at two works of art, and the one on the left is a painting, and the one on the right is a photograph. Because if I'm on the receiving end of your email, I can't see what you see. And people are always in a hurry to show you how smart they are, and they forget to lay that very critical foundation. And then I want the astute observer to really be more astute and say, you know, I'm looking at two works of art. The one on the left is a painting. The one on the right is a photograph. Each one has two people, and I'm looking at them in profile. Because your brain sees it, your eyes see it, and yet we think it's so blatantly obvious, hence my prohibition on using the word obviously. We need to say what we see before deciding to show how smart we are. There's plenty of time and opportunity to show how smart you are. Like, look at these two paintings. The one on the left is by Lucas Cranach the Elder, 1630, and the one on the right is 2015, called Intestines and Tassels. Isn't that wonderful? Intestines and Tassels. So here we begin to contextualize. This is where you say, I have a headless female figure on the right, and I have a headless figure somewhere on the left. Viscera in both pictures, a gold chain that's referenced in both paintings. This is where you contextualize. This is where you can talk about how smart you are. How many patterns you recognize, how many common threads you can pull together. But don't forget to lay the groundwork and lay the foundation. My theme, I have a theme in my program called Handsome Women of the 18th Century. And this is one of them. Her name is the lovely Mrs. Hannah Winthrop, 1773. She's probably the most important slide in the whole presentation. If you remember just one thing, the lovely Mrs. Hannah Winthrop. Why? She has a red and white bow in her bonnet. She's brunette. She has dimples, multiple chins, multiple pearls, blue silk dress, blue and white bow, sitting in an upholstered chair holding two nectarines. And you say, well, what does that have to do with my work? Why could she possibly be so important? If you see along the bottom one quarter of the painting this mahogany table, and you see this incredible reflection in the mahogany table of her lace and her skin of her forearm and her fingers, and even the stem of the nectarine, you say, well, so what? If I were to ask any of you to describe this painting, more than 50% of you would probably omit the table from your description. And you think, well, so what? Who cares? Here's the problem. It's hiding in plain sight. There are things that you are not seeing that are right in front of your eyes. Have you ever said to a colleague or a friend, how did I miss that? How did I miss that? It was right there. So the way to get around mahogany tables is to ask other people to collaborate. Say, here's my issue, here's the problem, this is how I hope to resolve it. Is there something here I might be missing? Do you see something that I don't? It's critical. So now I'm going to get you to start working. Look at these two works of art, and I want you to tell me how they're similar or different in any way, and don't say obviously or clearly. How are they similar or different? I'll give you a hint, they're both paintings. Yes?
There's one figure holding a thing in each of them.
Yes, each of the women in these pictures is holding something. The woman on the left is holding a picture of a nude man, and the woman on the right is knitting. What else? I saw another hand.
They're both in sort of a three-quarters profile.
Yes, they're both in a three-quarters profile. They're oriented to the left. What else?
They're both wearing hats.
They're both wearing hats. I'm going to tweak that a little. I'm going to say they both have things on their heads. The woman on the left has a headband, pearl, and feathers. The woman on the right has a cloth. Hat isn't wrong, but if we're looking for precision in language, what else? Similarities and differences. Yes?
One is smiling, one is not.
Yes, the woman on the left is smiling. Not only is she smiling, we can see her teeth. We don't know the tooth situation on the right. And we have a closed mouth. Yes?
One is young and one is old.
Yeah, one seems to be younger than the other. The woman on the right appears to be older. Anything else? Yes?
One's attention is on what is in her hand, and the other's attention is on what looks like the viewer.
Absolutely. The woman on the right appears to be looking down and absorbed by her knitting, and the woman on the left is looking out at us and smiling. I don't mean to rush things along. I don't have a lot of time, but is anybody going to notice this? Is anybody going to talk about this? People say, oh yeah, I was going to get to it. I know what you're thinking. Maybe somebody else will say it. She's showing a lot of cleavage on the left. Her neckline is so low, and the woman on the right, her neckline is so high. There are lots of ways to say it. You know, my cops will say, oh, her neckline is so low, her breasts are spilling out of her dress. That's okay. Because you're never going to get in trouble for saying what you see. Saying what you think is a whole other story. But you need to say what you see. And you don't have the professional option to look away from what makes you uncomfortable, what you don't like, and what you don't understand. As someone said to me not too long ago, do not ignore the elephant in the room. It will stomp on you and kill you. Don't do it. Now, I'm going to make an assumption that you all know who these gentlemen are. Now, for purposes of my session this afternoon, the one on the left is number 1, and the one on the right is number 16, just to make it easy. And I want to expand your model of inquiry from who, what, where, when, to include body language, facial expression, nonverbal communication, and eye contact. Thinking about those aspects, how are these images similar or different? And don't tell me they're both dead white men who are president of the United States. We know that. How are the images similar or different? Thinking about body language, facial expression, nonverbal communication, and eye contact. Yes? Yeah, you?
The one on the left is demonstrating the things. The one on the right, his body language is in. He's not demonstrating anything.
I like the way you said it, but rather than say that number 1 is demonstrating things, let's stick to observation. His hand is extended. How's that? And you said that number 16's hands are internal, or turned in. Good, what else? Yes?
One is a formal painting showing him in sort of the height of his grandeur, probably painted after the fact, and the other one is a photograph taken now in the moment.
Yeah. 95% of my classes, nobody ever says number 1's a painting and number 16's a photograph. They think it's so blatantly obvious, who needs to say it? Guess what? If I'm getting your email, I have no idea what you're looking at. You need to tell me one's a painting, one's a photograph. My homicide detectives a couple weeks ago yelled out, number 1's wearing a dress. Number 16's wearing a suit. That's a difference too. But I'm not trying to Where's Waldo you, but did anybody notice the rainbow in the upper right-hand corner of number 1? I'm not trying to trick you here. But is it critical to looking at the portrait of number 1? No. Is it important? Absolutely. Because there are probably 25,000 portraits of George Washington in the history of American art. Wait a second. The one we saw in that Art of Perception session had a rainbow in it. By remembering one detail, you've narrowed it down from 25,000 to 3. Imagine how that can work in your professional life. If you remember one small detail about one client, about one transaction, about one problem, one patient, one crime scene. And if you ever wondered about the power of facial expression, nonverbal communication, eye contact, and body language. Did you ever see this picture? Sure you have. And if I asked you for your visual analysis of it, I don't want to hear Osama bin Laden because he's not in the picture. It's 12 to 14 people looking fraught and anxious and nervous. And they're looking at something we can't see. Intellectually, we may know what they're looking at, but we don't know what they're looking at. We can't see what they're looking at. And to show you different perspectives, when I train officers who are about to deploy to Afghanistan and I say, what do you see in this picture? They'll say, you know, the only guy doing any work in that picture is in uniform. Because that's what they see. That's where their eyes go. Now, I'm going to ask you to compare and contrast these, and please don't say what my NYPD officers say every time without exception. Don't say before marriage and after. That's not the comparison I'm looking for. It's not what I'm looking for. How are these pictures similar or different in any way?
The upper figure has her hands out, and the bottom figure has her hand like underneath.
Under her right breast.
Yes.
So the woman, yes, that's it. I'll say anything. So the woman in the top picture has her hands behind her head, and the woman in the bottom picture has one hand on the couch and one hand under her, cupping her right breast. Although in my detective class in the NYPD a couple weeks ago, someone said, this is why I wrote a book, because I couldn't make this stuff up. He said, how do you know someone's not trapped under there? And I thought, I would have never thought of that in a million years. This is why I write a book, because people say incredible things. What else? Similarities and differences. Yes?
Eyes open, eyes closed.
Yes, woman in the picture, in the top picture has her eyes open, the woman in the bottom picture has her eyes closed. What else?
Neutral background, drapery.
Yes, no background and drapery. Yes, what else?
They're leaning on different sides.
Yes, they're reclining in different directions. What else? Yes?
They're both naked women.
They're both naked white women who are brunettes. What else? Thank you. He just said one is slim and one is not. That's all we have to say. But that's not even the reason I juxtapose them for your comparison. I was going to stand here until somebody mentioned the difference in their girth, because it is a sizable difference. 8 years ago, I put these pictures up at a psychiatric conference, and a very senior psychiatrist stood up, and he said with the most beautiful accent I've ever heard, He gave me permission not only to repeat his comments, but to imitate his accent because I did a good job of it. He said, the woman in the bottom picture is morbidly obese. He was from South Africa. Beautiful, beautiful accent. He said, woman in the bottom picture is morbidly obese. The woman in the top picture is perfectly healthy. And I said, you know, doctor, with all due respect, can you really tell me the woman in the top picture is perfectly healthy? I said, how do you know she's not schizophrenic? How do you know she doesn't have a blood disorder? How do you know she's not deaf? And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe how wrong I was. I said, you know what? You weren't wrong. Your choice of words was poor. And this is my opportunity to tell my sessions, there are very, very few things that are 100% in your control. Choice of words is one of them. Both in speaking and in writing, choice of words is up to you. And I implore my classes, don't make poor word choices. I hear people do it all the time. I want you to tell me what you see here, not what you think. What do you see in this picture? Yes?
It's a photograph of the middle-aged looking.
I'm very sensitive to the term middle age. Give me a ballpark here.
Ballpark for age?
Yeah.
Over 30.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough, because middle age to me is 35 to 70, so over 30 is good. So you see a picture of two people, a woman who's over 30, and what else? Good. 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 She's a woman, and she's wearing a low-cut, round, scoop dress, and she appears to be holding a child who is a boy and has blonde hair and blue eyes. What else? Yes?
Her teeth seem wrong to me.
Yes, she has a gap in her front teeth. Absolutely. If she has a gap in her front teeth, we don't know the child's tooth situation at all from this picture. What else? Yes?
But they're different races.
They are different races, yes. The child appears to be white, and the woman has darker skin than the child, has brown skin. Now let's go someplace that's not so safe. What do you think the relationship between these two people could be? What could it be?
Adopted mother.
Could be adopted mother. Could be foster mother. Could be biological mother. Nanny. What else? Friend's kid, neighbor, teacher, healthcare worker. It could be almost anyone. The only answer I don't allow, I train hostage negotiators, and they say, maybe she kidnapped him. She did not kidnap him. That's the only answer I don't allow. She could be anybody. So years ago, I put this slide up, and I said to the group, it was in New Orleans, what do you think the relationship between these two people could be? And a woman in the back of the room raised her hand. She said, it's the baby's biological mother. And I said, that's a conclusion, that's an inference. How'd you get there? What are your observations? She said, look at their noses, they're exactly the same. I looked at their noses and I said, this is exactly what I said. I happen to have information it's not the baby's biological mother. Now in the book I talk about seeing versus observing. What's analogous is hearing versus listening. We all hear, but we don't listen. So I said, I happen to have information it's not the baby's biological mother. And from the back of the room, she pointed to me and said, you're a racist. And I said, you know, we just met today. I said, you've known me about 2 hours. I talk about a lot of subjects, but I don't understand. What have I said that warrants you calling me a racist? Hearing versus listening. She said, you just said that can't be the baby's biological mother. I said, I didn't say that at all. I said, I happen to have information it's not the baby's biological mother. I live in Manhattan. It would never come out of my mouth that a brown-skinned woman couldn't have a white child because I've seen it many times. I said I happen to know it's not the baby's biological mother because after 9 months of pregnancy, 27 hours of hard labor, and a C-section scar this big, I know who the baby's mother is. It's me. It's my son. And the woman in the picture is 52 years old. She's from Trinidad. She's the center of my household. That child, whitest baby you're ever going to see. There is no biological tie between those two people, but they are combined. They are tied at the heart and the hip. 12 years later, they are still together. Notice that he grew up and she didn't. But you see, this is a conversation that we need to have. We need to talk about race and assumptions and biases and relationships based on visual images that we see. But here's the conversation I don't want to have. And I'm forced to have it all the time. When I do grand rounds in hospitals, I put this picture up and I say, okay, what do you see? I've had the chief of emergency medicine department at a major urban hospital tell me that child has Down syndrome. And I say, really? What evidence of the condition do you see? And he said, oh no, I don't see any. I know it when I see it. I've been told my child is an albino, but my favorite is that he has a thyroid condition. I said, why do you think this child has a thyroid condition? And he said, because he has a compressed neck from multiple surgeries. I said, you know, my kid was so fat till he was 3, there was no neck. And I said, guess what? He has a neck now. How about that? So all of these people came rushing to the podium to apologize for saying these things about my family. And I'm going to tell you what I said to them. I said, you put a picture of your kid up there, you have to have a thick skin. You could say anything you want about my kid, almost. I said, but don't reach for what you want to see. Don't try to get to a conclusion that you think you need to get to, because the ends do not justify the means. You are accountable for your observations along the way. If you jump to a conclusion, you better be able to say how you get there. Now, I'm going to give you an exercise that I give to my FBI surveillance agents. I'd like you to find a partner right now. It can be the person sitting next to you, the person sitting behind you, but they need to be close by. Find a partner. Now, I'm going to put a slide up. You're going to have 45 seconds to describe. One of you in the partnership is going to close your eyes, and the other person is going to have 45 seconds to describe the slide that I put up on the screen. And why am I asking you to do this? How often does someone say, picture this? And you're like, what do you want me to do? So the listener is going to have 45 seconds to form a mental image of what is being described to them. At the end of 45 seconds, I'm going to call time. When I call time, listeners open their eyes, all talking ceases, and I direct my questions to the listeners. You got it? Decide who's going to close their eyes. Half the room, shut your eyes now. All right, 45 seconds to describe, not this slide. Ready, go. Open your eyes, don't say another word. Listeners, look at the screen. One of these images was being described to you, and I want you to raise your hand when I point to the one that you think was being described to you. There is no kicking, pinching, or hitting on the part of the describers when I point to the correct image. No cheating, okay? Just out of curiosity, did any of the describers tell their partners it's a Monet painting? Too bad, they're all Monet. That's not going to help you. All right? So listeners, how many of you think it's the upper left painting that was being described to you? Raise your hand. Upper left. Hands up. Okay, hands down. Who thinks it was the painting in the bottom? Hands up. Okay, hands down. And who thinks it was upper right? Raise your hands. Good for you. Most of you got it right. Now, how many of you tell me, shout out how you knew what your partner said to pick the right one. What'd your partner say?
She said it was a black bridge.
She said it was a black bridge. Good. What else?
A red reflection.
Red reflection.
Different colored trees and water lilies.
Different colored trees and water lilies. Those are all good descriptions, but none are completely dispositive. Let me show you something. Each of these paintings had bridge, foliage, lily pads, and water. You can only talk about that for so long. I even gave you 50 seconds instead of 45. Now, if any of you had been truly observant and said, you know, I'm looking at this slide because my instruction was to describe the image, not the picture, and said, you know, there's this weird white border on the right side and the bottom of her slide, your game is over. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's just stupid. You gave me 45 seconds to describe this painting. Why would I waste precious few seconds to talk about a dumb white matting on the right side and the bottom of the painting? Here's why. Because in 12 years of doing this exercise, 6 pairs of people have identified to me that they have included the white border. 3 of those 6 have been United States Navy SEALs. And when I asked them why they include the border in their description, they said, it's because we're trained to use all the information we have. It's a matter of life and death. So my takeaway for you from this exercise is to say, you know what, I'm going to use all the information I have. There's always time to get rid of it later because you never know when it's going to change your game. Had you mentioned the border, there is no question which painting you were talking about. Blah, blah, blah. I've been talking for 45 minutes. What are my takeaways? What do I want you to leave this session thinking? Number 1, everything deserves a second look. What you see the first time isn't necessarily what's there. Think about the problems we have with eyewitness testimony. People swear they saw someone, and then they identify them in a lineup. That person wasn't even there. What you're looking at is a painting by Gerhard Richter, not a photograph. You need to look twice at everything. Number 2, big picture and small details are equally important. We have a barmaid here behind a cold white marble bar. Champagne, Bass Ale. Is that a paint? Is that a mirror behind her? Is that the barmaid's backside? Is that another barmaid who's the client over here? That's all the big picture. But don't forget the small detail. In the far upper left-hand corner of this painting is a trapeze artist's feet. Right here and right here. That's the whole reason the people are gathered in the first place, for entertainment. Big picture and small details are equally important. You know what I mean when I say no matter how similar 2 situations, 2 transactions, 2 problems, remember to say that one's a painting and one's a photograph. Lay the groundwork before you want to show people how smart you are. Tell people that I'm looking at 2 scenes by the water. Each one has people in it. In the black and white photograph above, we're seeing them from the back. And in the color painting in the bottom, we're seeing them from angles from the side. I talk about what you see, what you notice, what you perceive. Don't forget about the mahogany table. What are you missing? Here's the artist. Right here and right here. His name is Lou Bolin. He takes pictures of things, iconic things all over the world, everyday things, and he paints himself into his photographs. Step back from every difficult issue and say, what might I be missing? This is brilliant. Easter Sunday of this year in the UK, these children were on an Easter egg hunt in a rural part of the country. 2 men robbed homes and were escaping across the same field, and the police helicopter above was trying to chase them. The children saw what direction they went in, and they did what I ask every single class to do. They thought clearly and precisely in exigent circumstances. They collaborated, and they communicated with clarity and precision. They told the helicopter which direction the robbers ran, and they got them. Someone said to me, are kids in the UK just smarter? Is that it? But I thought the visual image was incredibly compelling. A reminder to be creative and resourceful in every job, whether you are neurosurgeon, Navy SEAL, police officer, nurse, social worker, library. We all need to be creative and resourceful. After the events of 9/11 happened, the federal government convened the 9/11 Commission and said, how did this happen on our watches and under our noses? And the 9/11 Commission came back and said the intelligence community of the United States lacks creativity and imagination. They couldn't envision that those atrocities would take place. So I started working with the intelligence community post 9/11 to try to bring the idea of creativity in intelligence analysis back into the fore. And I show you the work of Ellen Atsui. He's a contemporary African sculptor. And he makes these incredible sculptures that I'm showing you by going to distilleries in Ghana, picking up metal bottle caps from discarded alcohol bottles and beer bottles. He flattens them, he hammers them, and he sews them together to make this. The reminder to be creative and resourceful no matter what your profession. You need to look in the mirror at the end of every day. You're not going to see this. But you need to look in the mirror. Self-perception is critical to professional growth. You need to know what you did right, what you did wrong, how to replicate what you did right, and how to avoid what you did wrong. And I leave you with my last slide. Artful Perception is my website. You can read more about this training. You can contact me. Visual Intelligence is the book that I have just written. It was published on May 3rd. I think we're out of copies on the table. But the book is a natural extension and expansion of this program. But most importantly, I wanted to give you 2 visual images of looking at the world before the art of perception and after. And I show you 2 self-portraits of the artist Chuck Close. For those of you who don't know who Chuck Close is, he's a 20th and 21st century portrait painter, world-renowned, paralyzed from the shoulders down, and he paints with a brush in his mouth, and he has very limited use of his hands. The self-portrait on the left is how you saw the world before this. A white, bald man with green eyes, round glasses, and a goatee looking right out at you, wearing a t-shirt. Nothing wrong with seeing the world this way. But after taking the art of perception, I would prefer that you see the world more like the self-portrait of Close done 5 years later on the right. He's broken down every quadrant of information. He's made it more colorful, more compelling, more interesting. He's lowered his glasses to see the big picture and not miss the small details. And I believe from my experience that if you do all the things that I've written about in the book and that I talk about in this course, you think about your observations and perceptions, you keep your inferences, biases, and assumptions in check, you're careful about your choice of words, you ask what you know, what you don't know, and what do you need to know. If you think about all those concepts, I think it makes you a sharper professional, I think a more interesting person. And I leave you with this last anecdote. When my son was in elementary school, we live on the east side of New York, and he went to school in the West Village. So I would drop him in the morning and try to jog home to get some exercise because I'm never in the city. And I'm jogging across 12th Street, and a man in a wheelchair came out of a building with a rope tied around his midsection. He was walking the cutest puppy, little Labrador puppy I'd ever seen. New Yorkers are fussy, you know, you have to ask permission to pet their dog. So I said to the man, "May I pet your dog?" He said, "Of course." I got down on the ground, I rolled around, I had my long hair then, I got puppy kiss and drool and fur all over me, stood up, cleaned myself off, thanked the man very much. He wheeled towards 6th Avenue, and I continued towards 5th. I looked down the street. The man in the wheelchair was Chuck Close. I was so focused on his puppy dog that I didn't realize that one of my favorite artists of all time, whose work that I'd been using for years, was sitting right in front of me. There's a whole world out there we're not seeing. And I hope after looking at works of art and thinking about this program and reading the book, you'll expand your visual intelligence, bring it into your professional and personal worlds. Thank you very much for having me. I'll be happy to sign books, but does anybody have any questions? Yes?
More of an observation.
Yes?
I didn't see the cow until I gave up on it.
Well, that's an interesting observation. That's a good one. And you know,
My head started to turn away, and then I saw it.
sometimes we try too hard. Sometimes we try too hard. And I think if we just take in the information, our brains take in much more than we can possibly see at one time. And we need to think about what it is that we're seeing. Good. Any other questions? Anything? I work for the intelligence community. My life is an open book.
So about observing more, it seems that part of the problem is cognitive limitations in terms of we actually can't consciously process everything that's coming in. So how do you prioritize what you pay attention to?
It's true. We're barraged with information all the time, especially because we have digital technology. And so what I ask people to do is, you can't consciously say, well, I'm only going to look this way, or I'm not going to be more observant. But I ask the readers of my book and the participants in my class to become more aware of their perceptual filters, to become more aware of their biases and their assumptions, and to step back and say, you know, I see this, but is this really what I'm looking at? And I live in New York City, I practice on the subway all the time. Cops once told me when people get on the subway and off, you should know who's coming in and who's getting off at all times. Can you recite I talk about situational awareness. Where are you now? How do you get out? Are you comfortable? Who's around you? And think about long-term situational awareness. What are the problems I'm aware of? So yes, we're never going to master observing everything around us. But if I can get people to step back and think about the perceptual filters that they're operating on, and you take some of those filters off, hopefully you'll have a broader way to see the world.
Hey, thanks for coming in and giving this awesome talk. I have a question about perception as it relates to the development and production of art.
Yes.
I've started taking a bunch of like realist art classes that are just like really intense, like 3 to 6 hour model poses where you just go crazy into detail. And I was wondering if you had any insights about like the development of the ability to perceive, because I've noticed coming in knowing pretty much nothing that like the first couple poses that you do, you'll draw the head way over here because you think that's where it should be in your iconic like version of a person, and then it's really like totally on the other side of the page and everything's totally unrelated to where it really is.
Well, the method for art creation is actually analogous to thinking about strategic problems. Observation and perception are very different things, and your observations inform your perceptions. So while you may be in this very intense art class for 3 to 6 hours, drawing the heads and the hand and the torso, I encourage you, when you step away, to think about the image you were drawing, and your overall perception will come in differently. Because observations inform perceptions, and perceptions inform inferences. You know how something comes to you in the middle of the night, you've been like working on something, and you think about it during the day and you can't solve it, and in the middle of the night, you have this, what you think is an incredibly brilliant perception. I keep a notebook by the bed, and I realize when I wake up it really wasn't that brilliant after all, but I do scratch it, out in the middle of the night. And I think the same thing comes with artistic creation. Your perception of your subject is going to be separate from your observations. So I would take the time in class, when you have access to the model, focus totally on your observations and let the perception come to you later, and then go back and revise your work of art. Same thing with a problem. Step away, and I have a method in the book for stepping away from problems, thinking about what's camouflaged, am I looking at more than one thing at a time? Ask others, separate the observations and perceptions, and I think that's how artworks come together as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Yes?
Since it's been quiet, I have another question.
Sure.
I think you're very fortunate that you get to interact with so many people from different fields who are at the top of their field.
Yes.
So what have you found most surprising or learned from them and how they do their work and the way that they think? Because I imagine that doctors think very differently from CEOs.
They do. And I really feel very privileged to see the world through this professional lens and meet all these people, but I'll be very candid with you. I had a very, very senior detective in the NYPD, Detective Rosiello, and I noticed him coming to my class for the 3rd time, because I remember faces, and I said, "Detective, why are you here for the 3rd time?" And I'll share with you his very candid response. He said, "Because I suck at this." And he said, "I'm really bad at this. I'm not good at listening. I'm not good at describing. I've been on the job for 25 years, and your class made me realize that when I get called to a crime scene, I already have a vision in my head of what the crime scene is going to look like before I even get there, and it's not the way to do your job. So I find that when I work at very high levels in the intelligence community and in law enforcement and medicine, we have to get over this initial skepticism of, what is this art lady going to teach me? And what I try to get past is, I'm not one of you. I say, I'm not law enforcement, I'm not in the intelligence community, I can't tell you how to do your job, but I can help you do it more effectively. And if they'll let down that initial barrier of skepticism and realize that the works of art that we're looking at, those skills transfer directly over to what they're doing, I think they make drastic improvements. And it's been applicable at different levels, and it really is an honor for me to work across the professional spectrum. But I do see initial resistance, and then I see them embracing it. Gets to
And if
work.
I can ask, is there something you've learned from them?
Oh, I've learned a lot from them. I've learned a lot from them, especially when I'm working with people who do not have a trained eye in art. They will come up with insights and observations that I would have never considered because I'm trained in art history and I'm looking at everything contextualized. And they will show me things that I would have never considered in a work of art. So they've broadened my vision tremendously. And believe it or not, one of the strangest groups I work with are investment bankers. I couldn't figure out what they were going to get out of this class, but they do. And because they have to communicate across cultural landscapes. And they see things in works of art, as do the SEALs, that I would never see beforehand. Thank you again.